Hi everyone, Sajid Amit here and welcome to a review of the LETSHUOER Cadenza 12, which is an amazing IM and what I'm calling the King of ChiFi. Okay, before I get into the unboxing and I talk about, how amazing the unboxing is and I talk about these IMs, I'm using stock cables. I'm not using stock cables with it. I'm using cables from Ear Audio. A big shout out to Niranjan of Ear Audio, and he makes some fantastic cables. I have his latest arc series of cables here, which is, I think, to some extent, an aesthetic match with the LETSHUOER Cadenza. And I'll talk about this cable. I'll leave a link to Ear Audio's Instagram page, which is how you order from him. And these cables are super cheap. I think you can have them for $250 to $350 if I'm not mistaken. So don't hold me to the price, but it's around $350 for sure. It's not more than that. And I do think these cables hold their weight. Okay, but this is not a cable review. Although I do think this cable, bears a mention. This is a review of the LETSHUOER Cadenzas, which are these amazing IMs from LETSHUOER, which is another very amazing brand. Guys, I've not reviewed a lot of ChiFi on my channel. It's not a very polite term, perhaps, so I apologize if this term offends anyone. And I'm only using the term because it is a very convenient term that a lot of you relate with, a lot of you will immediately recognize. So where I come from, guys, the position or the point of view or the perspective that I come from, I'm not a huge fan of the idea of a target for every genre. And this is something you'll know if you have followed my work. I do think that different genres sound better on different kinds of frequency responses, and even subgenres will demand a certain kind of frequency response because different genres token different instruments, right? And different instruments have come alive with different frequency response graphs. So what works for a bassoon or what works for a flute and what really works for rhythm guitars with heavy riffs will vary. And it's pretty obvious to me, which is the reason why I don't buy into the idea of a target graph. I think it's useful. I think it's rough and ready, a good way of quickly predicting what something will sound like. Again, it doesn't always sound like it graphs, and that's a topic I've discussed at great length, which I'll not get into on this video. If you want to hear my views on how sometimes things don't sound like they graph, do check out my Campfire Trifecta review, where I do get into some detail about the ear anatomy. And I have more notes on this that I can get into from academic papers and such, which I don't want to get into right now. But my larger point is I haven't been a huge aficionado of ChiFi because ChiFi tends to dip into that whole Harmon target pool. And not just dip in. A lot of ChiFi amps tend to wade or swim through, or just as a matter of fact exist like Aquaman in the Harmon target sort of ocean. And I haven't been a huge fan of that because I personally find that the Harmon target is too sub-bass tilted and too upper mids tilted, which on first blush sounds exciting because sub-bass gives you that kick, which I like. But then over time, as of my tastes have matured, I've learned to value mid-bass because the sub-bass to mid-bass ratio, I think, is something that I think is very missing in a lot of Harmon target IMs. And then when you have that huge mound, this Mount Everest of a pinna gain, I think what tends to happen is at first blush, you get this excitement of getting vocal clarity and detail. But over time, it can get fatiguing, annoying, frankly. And then with Harmon, you have an entire treble roll-off, which doesn't really work for me because I like a bit of air frequencies. Because when you have that amount of air frequencies, you get a lot of sizzle and presence of cymbals and air around frequencies. And live music, when people are clapping, it sounds more lifelike. Overall, I think, especially for live music, you need a lot of this sort of air frequencies. So I'm not a huge aficionado of Harmon. I'm very critical of it. And if you've seen my work, and do check out my Campfire Trifecta video where I get into some detail about the Harmon target and my views on it. And I'll keep talking about this, I think, because you need someone in the hobby who is, speaking his or her mind about the limitations of this target graph, or epistemologically, the idea of a target graph and its limitations, I think, need to be said more and more, because otherwise I feel like too many aficionados jump into the hobby, get very excited about the target, nerd out on the target, and start flexing their muscles about the bro science that they believe in. And this is no offense to science. I'm a math minor from Dartmouth College. I've taken a whole bunch of courses on graph theory, which is not exactly what the Harmon graph is about, but I've taken a whole bunch of courses on advanced algebra, so I'm very familiar with graphs, how to read graphs, how to manipulate graphs for assessing data. Having said that, this discussion, I don't want it to veer towards graphs. This discussion is about, of course, this wonderful IM. So I'll talk about overall, my sound impressions of this, right? I don't want to start with unboxing. I'll leave the unboxing for the last, or at least I leave a discussion on the accessorization for the last. So one of the songs I was playing with this just a little while ago was "Are You Ready" by Disturbed, and it's a great song from Disturbed that Disturbed does really well. And off my Sony W1 ZM2 DAB, so keep that in mind. A lot of my impressions will be influenced by the coloration of this DAB. It's not exactly an uncolored DAB, but just so you know, I've tried this off other DABs and other sources. So while my views to some extent are colored by this, I will be able to negate some of those colorations or biases because I have tried this on other sources as well, namely dongles, the Angel DAC amp from Earman, etc. The Angel also tends to be a bit warm in my view. But anyway, so overall I've tried this with slightly warmer sources, and it does work better with warmer sources. So when I played this song, "Are You Ready" by Disturbed, I think overall I got a good sense of stage. I got a good sense of punch and slam. The track that I played before this track is 14 Years from Guns N' Roses, which is a track that a lot of you rock aficionados will know. It's from the Use Your Illusion 2 album, one of the greatest metal albums, or rather hard rock albums of all time. I mean, I grew up listening to Axl Rose croon with Slash, with Duff McKagan, and all these guys, right? So this is a huge song for me. Not just 14 Years, but this entire album is a huge album for me. I grew up on this. I was young getting into music with this album. So yeah, I mean, it played it back really well. I mean, 14 Years from Guns N' Roses was really well played by the LETSHUOER Cadenza. I thought Axl's vocals sounded beautiful. There was the right amount of melancholia, and when his voice soars because it has that sort of air lift, it was able to capture the inflections of his voice really well. Overall, I was very happy with the resolution on this IM. It is $2,000 currently, so it is asking for a lot of money, a lot of your money. So you do want to be sure that you're getting your money's worth in terms of resolutions. If you are looking for a benchmark, I would say this is as resolving as a 64 audio U12T, which is saying a lot because U12T is very resolving. However, I do think it's very tip sensitive. So I've tried a whole bunch of tips, and honestly, guys, you should find tips that fit you, because tips that fit me and form a seal with my ear canals might not be the best tips for you, but these IMs deserve and require and merit and demand, honestly, the best possible fit. With the best possible fit, you don't get the sort of, if you don't have the best possible fit, it might be a slightly brighter experience for you. The bass can sound, it still hits hard, but I feel like with the best seal, you get a better slam or better impact. So I played other tracks, guys. I played A Reason to Fight from Disturbed, which is another great song from Disturbed. I don't usually listen to a lot of Disturbed, but for some reason I got into this today. Army Ants from Stone Temple Pilots from the album Purple, another major album. I'm a huge fan of the Seattle grunge scene. Scott Whalen's vocals are wonderful. I also like the solo work like Barbarella and other tracks he's done. Army Ants was just very CD-like in the sense that it was very realistic. I felt like, CDs often tend to preserve information like spatial information very well. And with this IM and this DAB combination, I got a nice sense of stage. So I keep returning to the sense of stage because this does do stage really, really well. So for that alone, I think it's the King of ChiFi, but it does resolution very well. Impact-wise, I think the bass impact of this IM varies from track to track, because while it does have a sub-bass sort of a shelf, it's not as pronounced as Harmon. And while it does have mid-bass, it is, the way this comes together is that the bass impact is not as much as, let's say, a Campfire Trifecta. So if you watch till the end of this review, I'll be dropping some comparisons to my favorite IMs. I'm just looking around to see where I've kept them. But in any case, I'll be dropping some comparisons to my favorite IMs. Okay, I played Loungefly from Stone Temple Pilots. It sounded great. I played 1 in a Million from Aaliyah. And here the sub-bass impact, the sub-bass growl was pretty prominent. It was a very sub-bassy, a very growlish affair with a lot of sub-kick drum sort of kick and a lot of overall overwhelming sub-bass. So now to talk about its frequency response. This is in many ways something that sounds like Subtonic Storm. I would even say it's a cheaper version of Subtonic Storm. And I don't mean to diss it by saying it's a cheaper version, because in many ways it looks as premium if you look at the shells in particular. So the shells really attracted me, guys, in terms of its aesthetics, build, and comfort. So, and it doesn't make it in any way difficult to wear or anything. I'll just put this on so you see how well it fits. It just stays in. It won't come out. It fits my ear perfectly, and I feel like it's extremely ergonomically designed. LETSHUOER is not just any other brand, guys. I mean, they have so much credentials by now that that you, a part of the audiophile community, will know how serious they are. I mean, they're a very serious brand, guys, and they have produced one hit after another. Like, they can do almost nothing wrong. Like LETSHUOER S12, S15, and there was this Zeos collaboration. I'll just show you some of the things they've done so you just are reminded of how amazing this brand is. By the way, this is their stock cable, which is a pretty interesting looking cable. It's half naked, half sleeved. The only reason I'm using my upgrade cable is not for sonic reasons, but I feel like it's a better aesthetic match. So I just wanted to remind you of the credentials of this brand, because these guys have been, I mean, they're not exactly a new kid on the block. They're very serious and have tremendous consistency and credentials in this hobby. So first and foremost, you have the S12, right? Which a lot of people know about. It is, of course, an IM that a lot of us have loved. This is, a card of Cadenza that I dropped. So I've not heard the Soloist. It's a basic single DD IM. But I have it on good authority from people who've listened to this at CanJam that this is a fine IM. I've not listened to the conductor either. And I don't know much about this IM. EJ09 is also very highly rated that I've not had the pleasure of listening. EJ07M I've actually reviewed, and it is a fantastic IM, a sort of a more sophisticated and a take on the Harmon curve in terms of tuning. And EJ07 is another very good IM. Some people prefer this to the EJ07M. D13, they call it a smooth operator. I have no idea why. I've not listened to it. The Tape Pro is of course an IM that people like. There's a Singer, there's an S12 Pro, which is an amazing IM for the price. It's just groundbreaking for the price. So these guys have serious credentials, guys, and I think honestly, you don't go wrong when you buy a LETSHUOER IM. So they are in many ways perhaps the most consistent brand out of China. So to no surprise, this is a very impressive IM. So tonally, like I said, it reminds me of Subtonic Storm. So there is a nice glide from a sub-bass shelf to mid-bass. So it doesn't have a whole cavity in mid-bass, which you can get with a lot of ChiFi IMs. It has a smooth and flat mid-range. There's pinna gain. The pinna gain is not as protruding as Harmon's. Overall, the sub-bass and pinna gain are a little downshelved from Harmon, which to me is just wonderful because I think it makes it less fatiguing. It makes the bass more balanced with sub and mid. It makes the pinna gain a little more aligned with the treble. The treble, again, is not as rolled off as Harmon. So the treble, there is some air frequency peak. Interesting thing about the treble, this treble might not be for everybody, because I know some of you, especially among the younger population, and not just because you're young, it could also be because of how your ears are shaped. You could be more sensitive to the air frequency region. So if that's the case, you might want to audition this first, because air frequencies are one of the fortes of this IM. I do think you can tip roll and get less or more, or tune out or tune in the air frequencies to sound more present. I love how it's tuned with the air frequencies, and especially with the sublight IM, it sounds extreme. Sublight cable, I apologize. It sounds very, very airy. Now, with this upgrade cable, which I got from Niranjan of Ear Audio, it sounds a little less airy. It doesn't sound boxy. It still sounds very wide, as wide as on the stock cable. It just sounds a little warmer, a little punchier with this upgrade cable, which is why I'm using it with this IM, in addition to the fact that it matches this IM aesthetically. Now, technical performance-wise, guys, I feel like this is as resolving as I would expect from a $2,000 IM. I did not think this when I first listened to this off the stock tips. I tip rolled quite a bit, and until I arrived at these tips, I wasn't very certain of how resolving it was, but now I'm pretty sure that this is a very resolving IM for the price. As a matter of fact, it trades blows with the 6440 U12T. It doesn't match the U12T's level of mid-range resolution, but what it does, though, it has better treble resolution, and I dare say better bass resolution. The bass sounds a lot less one note to me than it does on the U12T. Compared to the Campfire Trifectas, which is of course a $3,000 IM and my favorites, it doesn't really match up to the Campfire Trifecta, because the Trifecta is a lot more, it's wider, it's punchier. It does, I think, match the Trifecta for resolution though, and that's also because Trifecta is not one of my most resolving IMs, I have to say. I've talked about this in the Trifecta review, that it's not as resolving. It's perhaps as resolving as the Symphonium Helios, which is of course a far lower priced IM. Again, the Helios is just outstandingly resolving for its price. So these are difficult comparisons to make. Soundstage width-wise, it is very impressive. It's one of the widest sounding amps that I've heard. Soundstage depth and image height are decent, nothing to write home about. Dynamics-wise, i.e. the sense of punch and slam and impact, I think is decent. It's, again, not one of its, fortes, but it doesn't leave anything wanting, especially, again, if you tip roll. And last but not the very least, timbre-wise, I'm a fan of this timbre. It does remind me a lot of IMs like the Susvara headphones like the Susvara, because string instruments sound very timbrely lifelike on this. Strings sound weighty, sound heavy because of the slight amount of mid bass or upper mids lift, and strings sound very tactile and very real. Voices in particular, male voices sound very, very throaty, very substantive, very substantial, and very heavy, and that's nice. And also because it has a nice amount of treble. Female vocals are among its fortes, so it is in many ways a vocal master. So if you like vocal music, if you like jazz and classical, this could be it. So guys, I talked about genres. I like most genres with this. I like rock and metal with this. If you have to have an IM that is a bit of an all-rounder, I think this is a better way to tune an IM, because if you want an IM to be an all-rounder, you don't want it to have a huge amount of sub bass, because a lot of songs don't even have that level of sub bass extension or bass extension. If you want an IM to sound like an all-rounder, you also want it to have some sort of a balance between sub bass and mid bass. If you want an IM to be an all-rounder, you perhaps don't want it to give it too much pin again, because then rock and metal sounds offensive. So in many ways, it's tuned like an all-rounder. And then what happens is, because it has a fine amount of treble, a very nicely done treble, it does sound excellent with audiophile genres like jazz and classical. Again, if you are very sensitive to treble, you might want to audition this first, or just be ready to tip roll, because it's not a deal breaker by any means. I think the treble is done really well. But it is a colored IM in that sense, right? Okay, guys. So that's it for me. I do think this deserves other, more detailed mentions and reviews and comparisons. So I'll keep talking about this in my other reviews, because it is in many ways, I think, one of the most interesting IMs that have come out last year. I listened to this at CanJam Singapore, and I wrote about it on HeadFi and on audiophile style. And even then, I talked about how I would love to spend more time with this IM. It's taken me a few months to get this in, but it doesn't disappoint. This is an IM that I think bears meditative sort of, an excursion, and because it does reward you when you tip roll, when you cable roll, when you source roll, and you explore this with different genres. For those of you who like understanding the character of an IM over time, I would highly recommend the LETSHUOER Cadenza. For those of you who like jazz and classical, this is, again, a very, very good IM. For those of you who like the LETSHUOER sound and like what they do in terms of giving you more technicals for the price, this is a very expensive IM, so I don't think it gives you more technicals for its price point, but it does enough. If you are a LETSHUOER fanboy, and I do think there's such a thing, this, of course, is worth adding to your collection. And last but not the least, if you're looking for a generalist all-rounder and don't mind tip rolling to rein in the air frequencies a tad, this could be your jam. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for my next one. Bye-bye.